If you've got an N47 2-litre diesel engine that's burning excessive oil, then watch this video, we'll show you how to fix it. So here we have BMW's N47 engine. This is quite common across the 1 Series and 3 Series platforms. So it comes in a 2-litre and a 1.6 variation. It's widely well known as one of the most unreliable engines that BMW ever produced. It's highly susceptible to timing chain failure and issues around oil starvation. Now, I think the oil starvation issues might be the actual lack of oil due to the oil going somewhere. So hopefully, if we can find out where the oil's disappearing in the engine, that might give us an idea as to why so many of these engines are actually failing. So my suspicion is it's the PCV valve, which actually on this engine sits here. So that controls the pressure, the positive crankcase pressure coming out of the crank system. And it comes out of this valve here, goes through that pipe and back into the air intake system, and it's burnt off through the turbo. Now, if that valve fails, it can cause a bit of an anomaly with regards to the drain of the oil from the turbo. So ordinarily the oil's pumped up into the turbo and has a return that goes back down to the sump at the bottom of the engine. Now it's gravity fed and it relies on gravity for that oil to return. Now, if we have a failed PCV valve that lets the positive crankcase pressure through the wrong way, it can actually cause a bit of a siphon effect with regards to the return of the oil from the turbo. And instead of it going back down to the sump, it basically pushes it out through this pipe and back into the cold air intake system. Now, because of that positive pressure also has another negative effect on the turbo. So obviously the turbo seals are not, they're a metal seal, they're not a watertight or oil-tight seal. You will get blow-by through it. Now with the additional positive pressure being put back into the system and the pressure that's being forced through the turbo can actually cause that oil, rather than it being returned from the turbo, to actually also go through the turbo seals and into the cold air intake system, i.e. the intercooler at the front. So we're going to get the car up off the ground, check the intercooler and see if we've got a load of residual oil in there. If we've got a load of residual oil, then we know what the fault is on the PCV. Well, there we go. There's the oil. It's pretty wet in the intercooler. So obviously the PCV has been leaking. I've now got to look at possibly taking the intercooler out and cleaning it off. There's a load, absolutely loads of oil in these intercooler pipes. Damn it. See if we can take these out and clean them up maybe. So we've popped passenger side intercooler pipe off. Now, it's a bit of a fallacy this one because the pipe's actually angled up, so we're not going to get any run out. But you can see how wet just by taking that pipe off everything is. I think the one is we've got to take, and this, I remember when I've done the front bumper was an absolute pig to get back on, but I've got to take this one off because it's the lower one to see how much oil drains out and go from there. If not, then it's front bumper off, whole intercooler out and cleaned through, but I'm inclined to wait until I've got the new PCV on before I do that because it's only going to get oiled up again. Now I do have a replacement PCV. Now this is listed as a non-serviceable part by BMW, which in my opinion is a bit of a money spinner for them. So apparently if that valve fails, you have to replace the entire rocker cover. And look at all the fuel rails and everything we've got to pop off, and all the injectors have got to come out and all that nice stuff to get to that. That is going to be an absolute nightmare. So on eBay, I think it cost me 12 quid for a new spring, a new diaphragm and a new cap to go on there. Now to get to that, we've got to drop this bracket off the top by the looks of it. It's got all these valves attached. So we're going to get that loosened off. There's a couple of what looks to be 10mm bolts and a hex screw in there, so we'll get them dropped off, get this loosened off and get access to that PCV. Okay, so at the end I've had to remove these two hex bolts, one there, see in there and there. Don't need to remove them 10mm, but this will lift off, and basically have to go around just putting a screwdriver under each one of these tabs very carefully, not to break it, lift that cover off, there will be a diaphragm and a spring, like I showed you a minute ago. We'll take that out, inspect them and replace them. I'm not entirely sure that my part is completely the same as this. I'll show you the differences in a minute. Well guys, annoyingly it turns out they are two completely different parts. So as you can see, this diaphragm here is very different to that diaphragm. So that's the new one. Sits in there with a new spring. And that's the old one. The cap is completely different. The clips are in a completely different place. Luckily we didn't break this one getting it off. That's why you always need to be careful. So the diaphragm's completely different. It sits completely different in here. So the diaphragm sits like that there. The spring sits over the diaphragm. So although they look similar, they're very different. So that's off an N47 engine. That's off an N47N series engine. So I've cleaned that up using fairy liquid the best I can, but it's just got no bounce in it. Compare it to that one. Obviously it's a different kind, but it's got a bit of kind of dexterity in it. That's got nothing. So as I say, I've ordered that part from Germany. It might take up to 2 weeks to get here, but for now we'll refit this one, check the intercooler and see how we get on. So that's that all refitted. When you put it down, just make sure you put your fingers down on the clips and make sure they click back in. We don't want it to leak any or cause any oil spit out there because we're right next to the turbo. So here we are a week later after, well, not replacing the PCV. I have got the replacement PCV, but all I did was took that one out, clean it up and refit it. And we've not touched the oil, and it's done about 400 miles since. And the oil level don't seem to have dropped. So I can get that cleaned off. So that's completely clean now. Let's get that dumped back in. Let's see what the level's at when it comes out. So as you can see, we're just under 3/4. It hasn't moved. So that seems to have fixed the problem. Now I have got the replacement PCV turn up from Lithuania, I think it was. But I'm not going to fit it because I don't want to disturb what I've done. It seems to be running fine at the minute. If the oil level does start to drop again, then I'll strip it out and put the new PCV valve in and see how we go. I'm really glad that solved the issue. I think had that not have worked, I don't know where I'd have started looking next, to be honest with you. It might have been a new turbo ultimately, which would have been very, very expensive. So next on this car, we've got an issue with the stop-start system not working, so we've got to look at the battery and see whether that's toast or not. And it starts the car fine, it's just the stop-start system won't kick in. And ultimately, we've got to go around and refit all the bungs and all the waterproofing that we took out previously, having to replace that body control unit and ECU in the footwell. Because obviously, as you remember back, we had about 2 inches of water in the footwell and throughout the carpets. It was absolutely saturated, so we had to drop all the bungs out and drain the car out completely. We've got to re-waterproof it now because we took all the bungs out. Else, if it goes through any kind of flood water, then it's just going to let in water. If you like the video, guys, don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and I'll catch you on the next one.